If you're looking for character builds, you've come to the right place, because it's time for another Full Build Friday. Last month, over on the Monster Monday side of the channel, we had a March of the Machines. This month, we're going thematic on FBF with April to build a pack of primate player characters, starting with the sublime Simian Sleuth, Detective Chimp from DC Comics.
Isn't that right, Detective Chimp?
First off, if you could give the video a like and maybe subscribe to the channel, I would certainly appreciate it. Secondly, let's get right into the build goals for this primal private investigator. Known among his own kind as the magnificent finder of tasty grubs, and Bobo to the humans, Detective Chimp served in a circus before his kindly caretaker was murdered. In fleeing from these killers, he came across and drank from the Fountain of Youth. This made him immortal, vastly increased his intelligence, and gave him the ability to converse with any and all animals. He used these skills to become a detective, developing into an investigator as capable as Batman or Elongated Man, though he has had some rough patches. When these investigations go awry, he has skills as a martial artist and a swordsman armed with a magical sword of night to fall back upon. In relation to this mystical blade, DC is also well versed in occultism, and has served as both a member of the Shadow Pact and Justice League Dark, furthering his connection to magic. Overall, we're looking at making an uplifted animal that has taken on the career of a detective, and become quite capable at it. He can handle himself in a fight, whether unarmed or wielding the Sword of Night, and is also well informed when it comes to magic. A drink from the Fountain of Youth has contributed to his intelligence, and also left him able to speak to all manner of beasts. To start this build off, we're going to be using the Awakened Animal Ancestry, which does come with a few issues. Since Detective Chimp is, well, a chimp, we'll be using the Climbing Animal Heritage to get a land and climb speed. He'll also be a small awakened animal, with the Fascinated by Society Ancestry feat to give him training in society, and to get some goods even on a failed check. Rounding out his ancestry are ability boosts to Constitution and Wisdom, but a deeply unfortunate flaw to Intelligence that we'll try to fix with the free boost going to Intelligence. When it comes to his background, I think Circus Born pretty fantastically represents his youth spent as a literal performing ape in the circus. Naturally, it makes him trained in performance as well as circus lore, and also makes him an experienced professional, so that he has something to fall back on to pay the bills when the detective business ain't. On top of all that, he'll also receive a background ability boost to his intelligence and a free boost to his dexterity, mainly to help with his armor class. Closing out our ABCs, DC here takes the Investigator class, which comes with an ability boost to intelligence. Investigators are equipped with a host of features, such as Pursue a Lead to gain a bonus in regards to a case, and Clue In to share that bonus with allies. In combat, Detective Chimp has devised a stratagem to see how an attack will go, and Strategic Strike to increase the damage that such strikes deal. In addition to all of that, investigators get a methodology, the best option of which seems to be Empiricism for Detective Chimp, which will allow him to recall knowledge, seek, or sense motive as a free action once every 10 minutes. This methodology also grants him the That's Odd class feat, but he also specifically picks out the Eliminate Red Herrings to make a critical fail on an attempt to recall knowledge related to his investigations into a plain failure, which might actually still net him some information if it falls into our Venn diagram of this feat and his Fascinated by Society feat. When it comes to skills, investigators would normally be trained in society, but we got that from DC's ancestry. Instead, we'll become trained in acrobatics, athletics, crafting, diplomacy, medicine, nature, occultism, performance, stealth, and thievery. We close out this build with some ability boosts to strength, dexterity, intelligence, and then wisdom. Now, unfortunately that being said, DC is going to be a tiny bit behind on his intelligence due to the flaw as an awakened animal. However, I personally think it can be fun to try to play through such weaknesses, and I kind of dislike the whole any ancestry can take 2 free ability boosts. So this build will feature some attempts to account for and play around this meager penalty. Diving straight into Detective Chimp's second level, he's going to expand on his abilities as an investigator with an Edgewatch Detective dedication, which will make him train in Arcana, but perhaps more importantly, will let him track targets with Perception. Handy since the Investigator class does get up to Legendary Perception. Related to this, DC also becomes an Experience Tracker, this feat giving him a free skill feat. On that topic, Investigators get skill increases and skill feats every level. For this one, he becomes a Combat Climber, since he is still a chimpanzee and an incredibly capable climber, although he spends his skill increase on occultism to become an expert in it. For his third level, Keen Recollection ensures the Detective Chimp will always have a bonus to recall knowledge, Skillful Lesson gets him those skill feats on odd levels, and he also becomes an expert in Society. Fleet is a particularly important general feat here, since awakened animals come with a lower speed, and he'll then take Streetwise as his skill feat, using that Society increase and letting him rely on that, which uses his higher intelligence, rather than the charisma-based diplomacy. We've got a fun little class feat at 4th level in the form of Strategic Assessment, which will let him figure out aspects of enemies that he hits with his strategic strikes. This can, in turn, help allies, and with all the teams that DC has been on, that feels right and will have a bit of a focus in our build. Speaking of those teams, many of them are magic oriented, so he'll use Trick Magic Item as his skill feat, which may reflect the brief period in which he was the owner of the Helm of Fate. He takes his skill increase to Athletics to become an expert of it, just helping him clamber about areas. 5th level kicks off with ability boost to Strength, Dexterity, Intelligence, and Wisdom. That increase to Intelligence makes him train in Religion, another magic skill, and he then becomes an expert in Acrobatics as well as his weapons. Urban Jungle as his ancestry feat overlaps a tiny bit with the Edgewatch Detective, but will let him track in urban areas at full speed without taking any penalties. While this helps in pursuing a quarry, his Forensic Acumen skill feat will help him figure out a perpetrator in the first place, using his medicine skill to examine a body and to gain a bonus on identifying the creature or the reason behind its death. At our Poking and Prodding Primate's 6th level, he gains Arcane Sensitivity from his Archetype, letting him do a non-magical Detect Magic. While this plays into his role as a detective, the Jungle skill feat is entirely based on his past in the circus. The real fun thing about this is that it just lets him carry 2 items and still technically keep a free hand to possibly use maneuvers with. He also becomes an expert in stealth with this level's skill increase. Detective Chimp gains Vigilant Senses and Weapon Specialization at 7th level, along with gaining a skill increase to Society that lets him master it. Naturally, our eminent investigator takes the Prescient Planner general feat to demonstrate his forethought. He also gains Biographical Eye from his Skillful Lesson, so that Bobo here can do a cold read on targets and see if something about them might have anything to do with the cases that he's working on. Speaking of such investigations, once he's got his quarry cornered, 8th level gives him Interrogation from his Detective Dedication, letting him inflict a penalty on any deception checks that the target might attempt. In combat, he can also use Dirty Trick to leave an enemy clumsy, setting them up for allies to close in and finish them off. We'll follow that up with a skill increase that makes him a master then in Occultism. Class features at 9th level include Fortitude Expertise, Investigator Expertise, and a skill increase that makes him a master in Athletics. From his ancestry feats, he becomes a Natural Ambassador, which lets him speak to any sorts of animals. An ability of his I wasn't certain I'd even be able to replicate at first. He also gains Break Curse as a skillful lesson, increasing the range of services that he can provide to clients that come knocking, while also playing into his knowledge of magic and mysticism. Naturally, 10th level starts with ability boost to Strength, Dexterity, Intelligence, and Wisdom. On the topic of features, he also becomes a master in Acrobatics with a skill increase. For his class feat, I like Connect the Dots as an option, for when he doesn't get a good Devise a Stratagem roll, as it will let him help a teammate land their blows against a foe instead. This may end up being important, given that DC isn't going to have as high of an intelligence as most investigators are due to his flaw, and so this helps provide him with some alternative options. Related to his ancestry, we're going to lean into him being a simian a bit with Quick Climb as his skill feat, letting him swiftly ascend when he can't simply use his climb speed. 11th level starts off with Detective Improvisation and Dogged Will, the former of which has limited usage, since he does have almost all of the skills already. He takes his skill increase to Stealth to become a master of it, but he isn't going to immediately make use of that. For now, he takes Thorough Search to better inspect the scenes that he's tasked with examining, and then grabs Disturbing Knowledge. allowing him to use occultism to throw off foes. Which, ultimately, this is just another solid 2-action debuffing effect for when his devised stratagem just isn't rolling well. As an employer of the Empiricist methodology, Detective Chimp can take Empiricist's Eye at 12th level, which provides some interesting options. Firstly, as an Empiricist, we have Expeditious Inspection, allowing DC here to seek as a free action once every 10 minutes. He can then use this to point out a hidden enemy as a single action and make them off guard to all of his allies. Now, if this subject also happens to be related to his ongoing investigation, he can devise a stratagem against them as a free action, and if that fails, he still has 2 actions to do a debuffing effect, such as Connect the Dots or Disturbing Knowledge. Further helping all this action economy is his Kip Up skill feat, which will allow him to stand up as a free action should he ever get knocked down. With most of his skills now at Master, he can take this level skill increase to Medicine, making him an expert of it. That brings us to lucky level 13. Fittingly, it has quite a few things to it. There's incredible senses, light armor expertise, and weapon mastery. He also becomes an expert in diplomacy with his skill increase. We actually get something to help his Empiricist Eye with sharpened senses as his ancestry feat, which will let him seek as a free action once per round, which is a much shorter cooldown than his Expeditious Inspection. It is a very simple effect, but is potentially huge for the build. As for his skill feat, I'm sure our Simian Snoop has some stool pigeons to call on, leading to Underground Network as his skill feat. We'll use this to gather information with society without attracting too much attention, which might be handy when you're an ape in a deerstalker cap. This build detours into a new archetype at 14th level, but maybe one that is coming in a tiny bit late, the Martial Artist Dedication. This mainly just increases his unarmed attacks damage, and if you want to lean into it more, could give him some more advanced sort of strikes. Other than that, we don't really have a lot of room to explore it in a non-free archetype game. When it comes to his skill feat, Swift Sneak is handy, and lets him take advantage of his smaller size to conduct stakeouts. Rounding out this level, he takes a skill increase to become an expert then in Thievery. We get a nice little parcel of options at 15th level, such as ability boost to Strength, Dexterity, Intelligence, and Wisdom. This latest boost will make him trained in Survival, as well as a Legend in Society with his actual factual skill increase. He gains greater weapon specialization and savvy reflexes for his other class features here, in, as I said, a nice little bundle. Prescient's Consumable builds out of his Prescient Planner General feat, letting him pull a potion, poison, or other potable out of his coat pocket at a moment's notice. Using this level skill increase to Society, he becomes a legendary codebreaker, which will let him swiftly decipher writing, or make him even better at doing so if he slows down to take his time. I do have to be honest here, 16th level's Reconstruct the Scene is mostly inspired by the Arkham Batman games. But hey, they're both DC Comics characters. It totally fits. He also grabs Rapid Mantle to get back on his feet if he ever gets knocked off an edge and manages to grab it. However, his skill feat increase goes not to athletics but to occultism, so that he might become a legend of it. For the selection of our smart and snappy suited Snoop's 17th level, he gains Greater Dogged Will. This time around, he increases his athletic skill to legendary with a skill increase. His final ancestry feat gives him natural senses, which he could use to take low light vision or scent. Both are handy and fit on a chimpanzee, and might depend on the nature of your adventures. His skill feat focuses on his occult investigator attributes, with Consult the Spirits letting him reach out to lingering spirits with his occultism and ask questions of them. Which, honestly, is probably pretty huge for a detective. His class feat at 18th level takes some inspiration from Prescient Planner, with Trickster's Ace, which will let him jury-rig a spell to trigger on a reaction. Even limited to 4th rank spells, this has some crazy possibilities, and it depends entirely on what spells you decide to prep for this effect. This level also features him becoming a legend in Stealth, which he can use to take Legendary Sneak as his skill feat. I don't think he's particularly stealthy, but it could be useful for those stakeouts and similar investigations. As we get into the final stretch, DC gains Light Armor Mastery, and also becomes a master detective, which has a host of benefits. Furthermore, he gets around to becoming a legend in acrobatics, which is mainly going to be useful for tumbling through and stuff like that. True perception as his general feat will help him seek out hidden prey to point out to his allies, while leverage connections as his skill feat lets him lean on his contacts a bit and eke some more out of them. To close out on the basics of this build, we'll take ability boost to his dexterity, constitution, wisdom, and charisma. His final skill increase makes him a master in thievery, mainly so that he can get more use out of his dirty trick. Then, he takes everyone's a suspect, as I think is the capstone feat that he gets the most use out of, and he ends his build on dubious knowledge, so that even when he fails to recall knowledge, he still gets some actionable info out of it. Now when it comes to playing Detective Chimp in-game, it will depend a little bit on what investigations he's following, as that will give him devise a stratagem as a free action against relevant foes. More normally, options such as expeditious inspection and sharpened senses along with his perception as an investigator means that he excels at finding foes, and can use Empiricist's Eye to point them out to allies. You'll want to use devise a stratagem when you can against enemies, but if that fails, he has some decent backup debuffing options, such as Connect the Dots, Disturbing Knowledge, or even Dirty Trick to help his friends. Which may be, as I've said, a little important, because his intelligence is just lagging behind a tiny little bit, behind that of most investigators. As for taking him into a free archetype game, you'll obviously use the Edgewatch Detective archetype, but you'll be able to get into the Martial Artist archetype much quicker, and will want to look for a finesse-based stance, which unfortunately excludes Guerrilla stance. Beyond that, you could probably consider something that dips into casting, since he was Dr. O'Fate for at least a little while. And again, this gives him some 2-action options when his devise a stratagem doesn't look like it will hit. That all said, that about covers Detective Chimp. Has our build collected the clues and answered the mystery on the best build for Bobo T Chimpanzee? Let's review and find out. Detective Chimp is a climbing awakened animal empiricist investigator with a circus-born background to call to mind his time spent as a simple performing chimpanzee in a circus. While we don't quite manage to capture the immortality that his drink from the Fountain of Youth granted him, Natural Ambassador and his nature as an investigator reflect the ability to speak to animals and the intelligence that he respectively gained from it. Many of the investigator feats naturally fit his role as a detective, and the Edgewatch Detective archetype only heightens that concept. When he finds himself forced into combat, he can use devise a stratagem with his fists as a martial artist, or some sort of finesse sword to represent his Sword of Night. He also invests heavily into the occultism skill, and has Trick Magic item, as well as Trickster's Ace, giving him some mysticism, based on his knowledge, association with, and use of magic in DC Comics. This simian super sleuth snoops in spots outside the standard, sussing out suspects with supreme skill while supporting the squad with sublime smarts. There's more monkeys to make, but this one's managed. Let me know what you think of it, and what other builds you'd like to see in a comment. If you like what you see here and you want to see more, consider checking out the Monster Monday blog, which is linked below, along with the Twitter and Discord. Thanks for watching, and have a fantastic Friday.
Excellent detective work, old chum.
Don't patronize me, old chum.